and this goes to the emotional divorce part of divorce that I think people don't talk about enough, which is that, you can sign the papers, but it doesn't mean anything if you keep up a relationship that continues the dynamic too, right? Even the abusive dynamic. My ex and I, while we were best friends, also, by the way, in the first couple of years, he was terribly emotionally abusing me. And I was like, why did I divorce this person who's still able to do this to me? And that's on me. That's me. I didn't set that boundary. I didn't vacate the role of victim.
Right. I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married with children.
It's been 12 years since we got this gang together.
And we're still running the rapids of living with a blended family.
And sometimes that is just not easy.
If you're looking for support and tools when it comes to divorce, step-parenting, co-parenting, and giving it your best,
you're in the right place.
We're talking about everything.
You ready to get this party started?
Always.
Hello. Get ready for a super fun episode today. And while I'm pretty sure none of you are novices to a few naughty words here and there, I must do my duty in case you have young ears in the room and warn you of a few explicit words here and there. But I kind of feel like they're necessary. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let me tell you about our guest today. Her name is Kate Anthony, and she's the host of the highly acclaimed podcast, the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. It is awesome, so awesome that it's endorsed by the New York Times. She is a certified divorce coach who helps women, especially those with children, decide the very tough decision of whether to stay or leave in a marriage. From that decision, she then helps them either heal the relationship or exit with grace. For the last decade, she has worked with hundreds of women all over the world, helping them make the most difficult decision of their lives and transition out of toxic marriages. But most importantly, she has been exactly where we have been before. So if you have been that woman with children wondering, do I make this work or do I leave? This is the episode for you. She's so freaking honest, and there's nothing I appreciate more than a guest sharing their real experience and being transparent and also owning up to the mistakes made. And even more importantly, sharing the example and the valuable lessons from those mistakes. Why I love this episode so much and why I think you're going to love it too is that she's talking about things that a lot of us might not want to own up to, like things that we're like, oh shoot, I'm guilty of that behavior, and here's what happened as a result of it. And I so appreciate that so much because it's hard to say that, and especially even if you've learned from it and you're finally in a place like, that was such a mistake, you still sometimes don't want to confess it to somebody, but she does. And I love that. And I think those are the things that we can learn from the most. Things like maybe overstepping boundaries when it comes to the ex and their new partner, and so much more, so many good things. She's super funny and so candid, and I absolutely just loved this interview. So with that, let's go and enjoy.
Kate, welcome to the show. I am giddy with excitement for all the things we're going to talk about today.
Oh my gosh, I am too. Our little pre-show chat has me just super excited.
Yeah. Can I reveal just before we get into this our one little secret that we do in the car?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it TMI or can I say it?
No, I think listen, this is what women do. We share our important secrets.
Oh, totally. Exactly. So
yes.
Yeah, we were just talking about, and I know women, you're probably going to raise your hand to go, yeah, me too. I totally do that. But you have tweezers in your car because there's nothing like that sunlight and the mirror and the closeness that you can see where you can get the perfect view for plucking those stubborn hairs with your eyebrows and getting you just can see it so cleanly. I can never get a good enough job in my bathroom. So whenever I can't go get my eyebrows waxed, that's what I'm doing.
That's it. Plucking your eyebrows in the car. You're at the traffic light and you're like, oh shit, right? I have them in I have tweezers in the console.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, now that we have that out of the way.
Very important. Very important, by the way.
So here's what I'm excited about today, because I love when I get to have someone like you on the show who's going to answer the questions that people ask us about. And sometimes we don't have all the answers. You know, there's a lot of things that Mike and I have been through. And then there's some things that I'm like, that's a new one. And some things that, you know, we're talking about today are people in blended families that are dealing with drama from exes, and it's putting a real strain on their marriage. And they're wondering, how do I know if it's like worth it to stick this through? I've already been divorced before. How do I know if we can make this work? And, you know, we're also going to talk about those that are in that place of, I am contemplating getting a divorce, but I've seen what my friends have gone through in terms of blending a new family. I don't know if I can do that. I don't want to go through the same drama divorce that she went through or that he's saying he's going through. So those are like really juicy topics that like we need some solid advice on.
Yes. And it's so my wheelhouse. I mean, the should I stay or should I go conversation is my wheelhouse. Like, that's it. Right. And then you add the blended, you know, that's a hard enough question to answer on your own, like with your own kids,
completely
the first time around. But to have that conversation in your head a second time is just like, oh no.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, the statistics in the US at least are, you know, around 50% for first marriages for divorce.
Yep.
And then it gets higher for second and third, up to 68% for second divorces, for second marriages, and 74% for third marriages. So the first thing I want to say that, like, if you're having this conversation with yourself, if you're asking this question and you're already on a second marriage or you're in a blended family, like, you're not alone. You've got, you know, like, there are more of you that asking this question than there are people on their first marriages, right? It's really tough. It's really tough.
Anytime you're going through that type of stress, it feels like you're alone. You feel like you're the only one because the feelings are so intense.
Yep. And they're intense, and people don't talk about this, right? And so we don't go to a barbecue and really talk about how hard things are. We go to barbecues and we pretend like everything's amazing, and we put on a facade. And, you know, it's like, sadly, this just popped into my head, but it's like miscarriages. If women knew how, you know, if we really talked about it, we would all feel so much less shame about all of these things.
Right.
You know, but we don't. And so we suffer in silence, and we think we're alone, and we think there's something wrong with us, where the fact of the matter is a majority of us are asking this question.
It's so true. You don't, when you meet someone, and I know this just in a blended family, you know, people ask, oh, you're a blended family. How do the kids get along? How do you co-parent? Do you all get along? And like you said, like your general, you're not going to sit there and go, actually, let me just tell you all the problems we deal with, how they don't get along, how this happens, that happens. You're just not going to do that. I mean, some people, maybe they do, but like typically you're just like, it's great. It all works out.
It's great. It's hard, but you know, we get through it and everything's fine. It's fine.
Totally.
Yep.
So before we like really go into all of this, can you give us a little bit of a background on you and, you know, how this became your work and how this became your expertise?
Yeah. Well, so I've been divorced for 12 years. And I was in a very volatile, emotionally abusive marriage. And I didn't understand what was happening. There was not a lot of language around this then, you know, this was 13, 14, 15 years ago. There was just not a lot of language around this. And my ex in couples therapy was diagnosed as a narcissist. So I use that term. I don't use it loosely. I don't throw it around. It gets thrown around a lot these days.
It does.
This is a diagnosis. He was diagnosed as a narcissist. I was diagnosed as codependent. But then it was like, okay, so you guys should go and like read some books on that. And there are a lot of books about codependency. And the only thing my ex could find was like how to live with someone with narcissistic personality disorder. And he's like, I don't think I have that. Right. And I don't think he does either, but because narcissism is a spectrum.
Yeah.
But he's pretty intense narcissist. And so we had this really volatile marriage, and I was asking myself every day, at a certain point, I was asking a lot of other people, how do you know? How do you know when you should stay or go? And it was the most agonizing, years long process of questioning and doubting myself, and then going and taking another class and getting another therapist and going to another 12-step meeting and doing and it was like I was doing so much work on myself, like trying to fix myself to fit this ever moving target of what I thought he wanted me to be. And when I knew, I knew. I really did. When I knew, I knew. And it was a moment. It was a frying pan upside my head moment. But it shouldn't have to be, because there's so much more information out there now. And what I ended up doing is, once I got out, and by the way, once we ended the marriage, we have had a really good divorce. And I say this, 12, 13 years on, that it ebbs and flows. It does not, it's not stagnant. Divorce is not a one and done kind of thing. And, I've gone through all of the processes of having to, do the legal and physical divorce, but then recognizing that the emotional divorce never happened, which is something that I want to talk about later, because I think it's important for blended families. As I said to you when we were sort of, gearing up to record, I was the really difficult ex-wife. So,
wow.
On that, no, I will definitely tell that story and talk about it. But, over the years of reinventing myself and becoming a coach and getting trained and certified and all of that stuff, and then really working in the divorce space, because I wanted people to be able to go through these divorces and know that there's a possibility, no matter how volatile, no matter how awful the marriage or abusive the marriage is, to a point, by the way, it's possible for you to do the work on yourself, to come out the other side, both of you, and have a better relationship and have things be better, especially for the children, right? And so, that's what I do. I help women make this decision. I help them unpack all of the boxes. And there are so many of them. It's a Marie Kondo emotional psychic clearing,
I love it. Yes.
And then I help women through the divorce too, as a divorce coach, right? Doing strategy and emotional work and letting go. Because here's the thing, if you're answering this question properly, it will significantly reduce your chances of repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again, which is what happens when the divorce rate goes up from second and third marriages. It's usually because the first time we're like, oh my God, they're such a problem, I need to get rid of them, right? And then we just find another one who's like, the same wolf in different sheep's clothing.
Right.
And so, and maybe not even a wolf, just the same, it's us, we're doing the picking, right? So it's really important, in order to mitigate the chances of you having a second or third divorce, that you do a lot of investigating as to how you ended up in this relationship with this person who may or may not be a total asshole. Can I curse on your show?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I mean, I knew you were my people. I just wanted to check. But this person may be a total asshole, but like, you picked the asshole, right? And so let's not just be like, oh, he's an asshole, let's take him out to the dump and find a new one. It's like, well, he's an asshole. Why did I choose that? Right? And doing that healing work is what I help women with as they're making the decision to stay or go.
I love that so much. And it's all about, it's really taking responsibility for what you get back in life.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to.
I'm so curious that I've got to jump to it, but oftentimes I'm talking to people or people are writing in and they are dealing with the drama X. It's not often that someone says, I was that person.
Yeah.
That was me.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't so much drama, but, and I do believe it's the same, it's often the same thing, right? I mean, look, I think at the end of the day, we're scared. Right? The drama X is usually scared. They usually have a lot of resentments.
Yeah.
They're usually, I'll tell you my story. So
Yeah.
when we got divorced, right, my ex and I were like, we kind of jumped over a few steps and we were like, okay, great. We're not married anymore. Now we're best friends. And we did everything together. And we had holidays together and we had dinners together and we went on vacation together and like everything. And it was great because we were no longer getting our emotional needs met from each other. We were still able to maintain the things that were good about us, which was like the fun that we had. And I was free to be whoever the fuck I wanted to be without him criticizing me. And if he started to, I was like, fuck off. I'm not married to you anymore. And it was easy, right? Everything just rolled off we were able to have things just roll off our backs really easily.
Yeah.
And when he started dating, I was sort of the gatekeeper, right? So I took on what I refer to as sort of the role of first wife. Right? Like I am first wife and I will invite you to my Thanksgiving dinner. And I will, and I befriended these women and I sort of welcomed them into the family, but it was sort of clear that look, I'm a nice person. So at the end of also genuinely, like I wanted to have a family. I wanted us to be, what I wanted is what I have now, but I didn't understand that there are so many steps to get there where my ex's current wife and I are really good friends.
That's
and
awesome.
I wanted that whole thing, but I literally jumped over like 10 steps and I was like, hey, yeah, coming up. And then I fucking resented the shit out of everybody. And I'm like looking around my dining room table and over Thanksgiving and I'm like, why are these people here? None of these people serve me. No, like this is all me. Like what is happening? And I got really resentful. But what was really happening in a number of ways was that I was pissing on my territory. My ex was my territory. And I wanted to make sure that everybody kind of knew that like whoever came in was like second tier.
Yeah.
And when he met the woman that he married after me, she was having none of it. She was like, are you kidding? Back off.
This is the one he's married to, you said?
Yeah, this is the one he's married to now.
Okay.
She was like, back off, bitch. This is not your territory.
Yeah.
And she was 100% right. And also, we went about this whole thing. It was messy as hell. It was, nasty emails. Like I received an email from her that was the nastiest thing I have ever received in my life. It was so painful. It was awful. And, but what she was really saying was back off.
Yeah.
And she was right. And so there was a period of a couple of years where she did not speak to me at all. And if I went to pick up my son, she would open up the door and let him out like a dog and wouldn't speak to me. And then eventually, like my ex would come to me and be like, like he wanted her and him to go to Halloween at my best friend's house. And I was like, I mean, no, like she literally doesn't talk to me. Like if it was any other arrangement, like, and it was nice, like fine, of course. But like she doesn't speak to me. She's really mean to me. And so eventually I was like, I think this is your job. And I said, this is now your job. Like you're in the middle of this and you're coming to me to fix it, but I'm like I broke it in certain ways and I did make amends for those and I took responsibility, but she's the one who hasn't let it go. And so if you want us to all do holidays together, like this, especially at my best friend's house,
Yeah.
then like this. So eventually the next, to his credit, and hers, the very next time I went over there, she opened the door and was like, hey, and that was all it took. Like we didn't need to have a whole like processing of our shit, right? Then it was, from then on, it was fine. And we've gotten closer and closer and closer as the years have gone on, as she realizes that like, I am literally not a threat. Like,
Right.
she can have him. And we've gone through a lot of blended family drama together. And we've needed each other. We have very, 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 there's been court stuff, legal battles that are not to do with our immediate family, a lot of crises that we have had to be a family. And, and I always say to people who are like, oh my God, you guys are so close. This is what a great relationship you have. I always say, like, the process of getting here was bumpy. It was messy. And it was also important. Like, it was an important process. I mean, I think there are things that we both did wrong, but, I think people can avoid,
Right.
like, but, as an ex-wife, I can say that, this goes to the emotional divorce part of divorce that I think people don't talk about enough, which is that, you can sign the papers, but it doesn't mean anything if you keep up a relationship that continues the dynamic too, right? Even in the abusive dynamic, my ex and I, while we were best friends, also, by the way, in the first couple of years, he was terribly emotionally abusing me. And I was like, why did I divorce this person who's still able to do this to me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's on me. That's me. I didn't set that boundary. I didn't vacate the role of victim.
Right.
So that's a whole lot.
I know there's so many parts and pieces that I relate to on both sides, like the getting divorced, but yet still having certain things that still exist, whether it's, the bad stuff or, oh gosh, there's so many things. And I'm always careful about what I say.
I know. I hear. Yep. I gotcha.
but we do, we've talked a lot about in terms of the boundaries and the like, hey, this is out, we're the priority now. It was my mom was the one who really opened up my eyes. I may have talked about this before in an episode, I'm not sure, but I remember she had once said to me, hey, look, when you're divorced, you don't still get the benefits of these things in a marriage,
Yes.
like that emotional support, that getting to be, best friends or this or that. And she was, essentially it was saying that too, for my husband and I, when we were like dating on both sides, because there's things that you each get kind of like, well, wait a minute. That's something you would do for your wife, like, or that's something you would, and it's a fuzzy type of a thing, because you're trying to keep things smooth. You're trying to like, but shouldn't we remain close friends? Shouldn't this, shouldn't that? And then you really start to, you have to go through it before you realize what kind of boundaries need to be set in place.
Absolutely. And I think it's different for everybody, but I call that the shifting of primary. I call it the shifting of primary, which is probably like a terrible name for it, but it's just what I named it years ago. And that's really like that it's a mindset shift of who your primary person is now. It's like my ex was my person for a really long time. And then he just continued to be my person until his new person was like, he's my person.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get to be both people's person. And I was like, oh. And then it's what's extra hard. What was extra hard for me was that I didn't have a person. So then when he got taken away rightfully as my person, then I didn't have a person. And I had to come like face to face with what it was like to really not have a person, and, oh my God, the day I had to change his, like, in case of emergency was like not, because I saw on his phone that she was his in case of emergency, and I wasn't anymore. And then he was still mine. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll change that, but I don't have a person to do, like, and it's
Yeah.
hard and it's sad. And, and then I was on the other end of that where I was dating someone very seriously, and he'd been divorced for a couple of years, and he and his wife were still best friends. And he would tell me about something. He like told me at dinner some like major thing that happened. But he was like, yeah, and I called his ex-wife's name was Amanda. He's like, yeah, I called Amanda and like talked about it like when I was on my way home from work. And I was like, huh.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Yep.
I kind of feel like I should be your first call. Like I kind of want, and he was like, oh my God. And it was interesting because she was in another relationship too. And he kind of felt the same way. He's like, why aren't I your first call? And, to everybody's credit in that relationship, like he went and talked to Amanda. Amanda went and talked to her boyfriend. And like everyone was like, yeah, you're right. We need to remix this. Right. Like,
Yeah.
but some of it is habit and some of it is enmeshment. But it is, you have to go through it and be like, oh, that's the role that your new significant other is supposed to be playing for you, not your
Right.
ex.
And like you said, it's different for everyone. It's like you have to know when you get into that new relationship, and that's the priority, right? Like you two are each other's priority now. And you decide together what's going to be comfortable for both of you. Like I am, what are you not comfortable with in terms of like, no, she doesn't get to call you at 11 o'clock at night, or he doesn't get to, just because he's had a bad day, get to call you and you're going to answer right away. Those types of things. You just like, but there are people that are totally fine with it. So it is like a unique situation. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
In talking about all this, especially, you having been, I would say you and I were on the like opposite sides, right?
Right.
So, I always wonder in terms of, because I know we're going to talk about this in terms of making things easier for the kids and making it a smooth process. In my mind, the ideal situation is that all the parents get along well. And I've seen this done really well. I will tell you, every time that I've seen it done really well, they have gone through some crap in order to get there.
Yep.
And I've also seen where what is actually best for the kids is to never make it too friendly, to really keep it strictly business. And I think a question is, there's patterns, there's things that you can see where there's this, big cycle of drama, and then it settles down and somebody has the olive branch, somebody reaches out and it's like, okay, now we're calm again. Now we can be friends. And so the kids are like, yay, all the moms and dads are friends again. And then the drama happens again.
And that's the worst, right? Because
that's the worst.
Because that's not real, right? That's like somebody's capitulating, or there's codependency. It's fake. It's not right. Because if it was healthy, it wouldn't be as dramatic as that, right?
Yes.
It would not have a drama cycle to it, especially if the drama cycle repeats and repeats and repeats. Really not healthy.
And that's what I wanted to clarify, because I think there's times where people, are like, well, my ex has apologized to me. He's being really nice. And now it's, maybe we should try this again. But, and then it's been like years of this. So I guess like the question is, how do you know when it's like, okay, let's forgive and let's try to make this work? Or you know what? We can forgive, but we still got to keep this distance for the sake of the kids and for the sake of all of us.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that, it's a hard one. It is a hard one.
Yeah.
And I will say that, we have gone through these cycles over the last 12 years. I don't think my son is as aware of them. Right.
Okay.
Because
which is awesome.
Right. Like there is stuff that goes on in the back. Like if they only knew, oh my God. If these kids only knew all that was going on in the background. But I do think that I guess how do you know do you feel calm and settled and at peace with the relationship? Or if you're waiting for another shoe to drop, then it probably will.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so,
That's a great point right there.
right? I really think that's it. If you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, it probably will. So protect yourself and
Mm-hmm.
have those boundaries. And look, if it goes and it could be a matter of, time that you need to heal and the shoe doesn't drop because it's just a matter of like you need to heal from the number of times that it did. But even then, take the time to do your own healing.
Yeah.
Right? And just because one person thinks it's the best idea for the kids doesn't mean it always is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It may not be the best for you. Right? So if someone is sort of trying to strong arm you into a relationship that makes you not feel comfortable, first of all, I'm going to ask you, how does that mirror the relationship that you had when you were married to that person? How does that, there's a coercive control aspect to that. And if you're feeling any discomfort around it, your answer is space.
Yes.
And there are a million and one ways to be cordial and to effectively and kindly co-parent with someone that is not your best friend and having Sunday dinners with you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's I think how I would answer that.
That's such a great answer. It's such a great answer. I love that.
Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
No, it totally does. So
I think it's, really also just checking in with your body, right? Like, God, our bodies know everything.
they
And
really
so
do.
the idea if the idea of it makes you, if you stop thinking about it, and I say this is a really cerebral person, but stop thinking about it, close your eyes, take like 3 deep breaths and ask yourself how it feels. Like imagine the situation, whatever someone's, whatever it is, having Sunday dinners, having Christmas together, right? And if it feels peace and calm and clarity, like that's great. If it feels tense, if your body feels tense and it hurts and your heart starts racing, it's not okay. It's not safe for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not safe for you, you do not, by the way, need to explain that to anybody. You don't need to tell them that. You don't need to sit them down and have a conversation about how you don't feel safe. You can just say, you know what? I don't think so. I'm not ready for that right now.
Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
And it's so true. I can think of right now myself. I know exactly where I feel it.
Uh-huh. Right? Yep. Me too.
Hey guys, did you know that you can text us now? Like if you want to be the first to know if we're going live or just launched a new episode, or maybe that we just went out on a date or had a fight, who's right, who's wrong, maybe we ate too much for dinner or missed a workout. No, seriously, we want to share more of what's going on in our lives and we want to make sure that you don't miss out on anything new. So send a quick hello to 760-389-3722 and let's stay connected. All right, back to the show.
Let's go back now to the should or stay or should I go? And specifically, I think that the first time, second time, whichever, like wherever you're at, I'm guessing a lot of this can apply to that. But it is a scary thing going into a second time relationship, marriage, especially when there's kids involved, because it's at risk, especially if you've been through the heartbreak and the hell of divorce the first time around. And then if it is your first time around and you've seen other people go through it and you're just like, hell no, I don't want to go through that. But so you don't want to not go through this something based off of when it could be the smart choice. It could be better for you. There's happiness on the other side just because you don't want to have that pain right now. So how, what are the things to really be looking at, especially when you're in a state of almost not being super clear? Because when you're in those stressful states, it's very hard to think clearly because there's adrenaline happening and there's stress and butterflies, not in the good way. And it's very hard to think clearly when you're just like, I just don't want to feel this way. I just want to not feel this.
That's so important. That's so true. And it's so important. It's such a great point because especially if there's any abuse or whatever, just, it is when you're in a trauma response, which is sort of what it sounds like you're describing.
Yeah.
You actually can't have no access to the reasoning part of your brain.
Yeah.
So, I have clients who talk to me about this all the time and they're like, why can't I make a decision? I don't understand. Like, I know this, I know it's terrible, I know it's bad, but I can't make the plan to move forward. And I'll say, because you physiologically cannot make decisions when you are in an active trauma response, because the part of your brain, the amygdala, that is responsible for, that comes online when it feels unsafe, that's your fight or flight, that shuts down the frontal cortex. When that is activated, the part of your brain responsible for reason and decision making and all of those things shuts down, literally. Does not function. So if you're in a constant state of trauma, like, of course you can't make that decision, right? So at that point, I would say it's important to address the trauma, and it's very hard to address trauma when you're in it. So this is for extreme cases, right? But if it's just general, like, ugh, like, I don't know what to do, right?
Yep.
Then, it's less about a trauma response, but there are things to do, right? And one of them, the first thing I do, and so I have a program called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And the very first part of it, the whole first module, which is multiple sections, multiple, modules within a module, is all about yourself, right? It's all about learning to sit and listen to that part of yourself that knows, like you were talking about, that breathing, that quiet space. Because listen, especially women, we fucking know. We know. And then we have our inner critics that come in and tell us all the reasons why not. And we're not, oh, come on, that's, all of that stuff, right? We go into family history, family of origin. This is important. This is really important. Like, are you making a choice from a family of origin perspective, or are you just triggered? Is what's happening now really bad or toxic or not okay? Or are you just a really unhappy person? Right? Because I hear that a lot. Like, I hear that a lot.
That's a great point.
I just did a TikTok about this and an Instagram post about this today about, like, are you miserable in your marriage, or are you just a miserable person?
What is your TikTok? I'm going to follow you right now.
Oh, it's the Divorce Survival Guide.
Divorce Survival Guide. Okay, I was going to say it's same as
I only just started last week, but yeah, and it's like, first of all, I don't know how much of your listenership is dealing with toxic abusers, but a lot of mine is, and so it's like toxic abusers' favorite thing to do is to say, is to make your life a living hell.
Yeah.
And then tell you that you're a miserable person. And you're like,
yes. We hear a lot of this. I can't even tell you how many people that is that are dealing with that. So yes, continue on, because I'm
okay, good. Yes. Yeah. Right. So it's like, they literally will make your whole life miserable and then be like, you're just a miserable person. It has nothing to do with us. If you just fix your misery. And then the worst part about it is that codependents believe that. We believe it. We're like, oh, I'm a miserable person. Okay. I mean, I do suffer from depression. I do have like this, and maybe I am just a miserable person. Well, I guess if I just worked on myself harder, then I would be happier, and then this marriage would work. But the design of the marriage is to make you miserable. And it's because toxic abusers are actually miserable themselves, and they can't be in their own misery. So they got to get it out of them and project it onto you, and then make your life difficult. And then they feel better about themselves. And then you're just like, right?
Yep.
And, sometimes it's helpful to look in the rearview mirror and be like, have I always been a miserable person? Like, am I actually a miserable person? My ex told me for years that I was cold. He's like, you're just cold. And I'm like, I had to finally be like, I don't know a single person in my entire life who would ever describe me as cold. except for the person who sucked the emotional air out of my world, and that I
Yeah.
literally could no longer give anything else to, because I had nothing left to give because it's a bottomless pit of need. And I'm the cold one. Like, because I have nothing left. Because when you come to me for the, 10,000th time about, whatever it is, my response is just like, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm the cold one. Right? So, most of us know ourselves well enough to be able to look back and be like, am I a miserable person? Is that me? Or am I being made miserable?
Right.
Right? I have the same thing with chronic illness. I can't tell you the number of women I know and that I have worked with and that are in my Facebook group and my world, my followers, who tell me that their chronic pain, their chronic illness disappeared when they got divorced.
Yeah.
Crazy town.
I've heard the same thing, because it eats away at you like a disease. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. No one should have to be miserable. No one should have to be miserable all the time.
And what you said earlier about what we allow as that, it's that behavior that we allow, we can blame the asshole, right? But we chose the asshole.
Right.
We can blame all these, toxic people, but we allow those toxic people. We allow the behavior in our life. So it's really, what are you going to do to allow yourself to be who you are, which isn't that cold person, or whatever somebody's calling you.
Yep.
And
And I want to sort of call out the word allow, because there's something about the word allow that, like, I don't have control over the other person, right? Like, but I'm allowing it into my life, right? Or I'm taking it on. That's the worst part, is that we take it on, we absorb it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just like, oh my God. And what we do have control over is not absorbing it. We have control over doing our own work and unpacking our own boxes, so that it's almost like we have to do the work on ourselves to become strong, introspective, clear, right? We have to know who we are. And so few of us do. And so then it's really easy for another person to dictate to us who we are, because we're like, oh, is that who I am? Okay, I guess so. Right. But when we know exactly who we are, when someone tells us who we are and it's wrong, we can say, actually, no, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And we start to outgrow our relationships. This is why, like, a lot of women will start individual therapy because they think there's something wrong with them. And as they grow in individual therapy and they become much stronger and clearer about who they are and, what they value and all of those things, they outgrow their relationships.
Yeah.
And it's not
so
because, I've heard people say, I had couples therapists who used to say individual therapy causes divorce. And I would say that individual therapy causes people to know who they are so that they no longer stay in relationships that don't fit them.
Right.
But if the relationship...
Wow, somebody said that. Interesting.
Oh, yeah. Our couples therapists, they're like, we don't believe in individual therapy. I've heard a lot of couples therapists say that, and I'm like, okay, but yeah. So it's important to do the work on yourself, because then either way, right? Because first of all, you do the work on yourself, you do the unpacking, and then you're like, oh shit, it is me. Oh, and I have control over that. And I can work on these things and heal these wounds. And so that when my husband does that, it doesn't send me off and trigger me. And then, like, that's when individual therapy will save a marriage. Right. But
totally.
The opposite is also true.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's the ultimate goal is fulfillment, happiness, feeling all of feeling the good things. Yes. So sometimes it's it might not look like what you're thinking it's looking like. Because a lot of times I feel like a lot of times people will do couples therapy and things like that. I know there's good intention, but a lot of times they're thinking, oh, this therapist is going to help me change him or
And
change
that's
her, or
so
this.
dangerous, right? Such dangerous thinking.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Instead of going, well, what if it's less about changing that person and really looking inward, like you said,
Yes, exactly.
and doing the work on yourself, because then you start to perceive things differently and realize, actually, that thing about that person wasn't really what was bugging me. It's something about me.
Yes,
I mean, those are the type of aha moments that you have.
Yeah, and those are so important, right? Like, I always talk about it like, I guess, like, it's like I have a wound. I have an open, festering, gaping wound on my arm, right? And it's my wound. And somebody in my life keeps like hitting my shoulder where the wound is. And if I didn't have a wound there, I might be annoyed that someone keeps knocking me on the shoulder, but I wouldn't freak the fuck out. Right. And so I have to heal the wound enough so that I stop freaking out and like do the work and put the salves and the Band-Aids and bandages or whatever and heal that, so that when my husband knocks that wound, I can be like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm really sensitive in that place and I'm working on healing it. In the meantime, could you try not to hit it? Right.
Exactly.
And by the way, someone who loves you is far more receptive to that. They'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Can I bring you some tea? Right? As opposed to you being like, get the hell off me. And they're like, whoa, you're crazy.
Totally.
Right? Then they think you're insane, which you may or may not be. But like, you invite compassion when you take responsibility.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that right there. You invite compassion when you take responsibility. That's so good.
Thanks. I'll meme it.
So I know, gosh, I feel like I could keep talking to you for hours. One thing I really also want to cover is, because this is another big thing. I mean, a big thing in our audience is parents. And like the biggest concern, right, is that your kids are okay, that they're thriving and that they're happy. And even though we want that, sometimes as parents, we are doing the things that are causing stress when we don't intend to, whether it's using the kids as leverage, or I'm going to make them like me better than you, or, oh, you think your stepmom's so cool. Whatever. It's all of those things because of our egos, right? We're afraid, we're hurt, we want to feel better. And so we grasp at those immediate things. But what I love to cover this as much as I can, because that's the whole reason we started this whole podcast. Was I feel like it's not fair for kids to have to go through things that I have seen that kids go through, the stress. They're supposed to be kids. It's not their job to make their parents feel better. It's not their job to, make anyone else happy. Their job is to be a kid, right? To have fun, 100%. to learn responsibility, all of that stuff. So what are I just want to hear your thoughts on that, and how can we not freaking drag our kids through the mud when we're going through our own stuff with divorce and co-parenting?
Well, again, like, do the work on yourself, right? Because for me, it always comes down to the same thing. Take responsibility. Because look, my mediator said this to us the very first time we ever met with him. He said, you have a choice to make right now. You're either going to put your son at the center of this process, or you're going to put him in the middle. And we were like, at the center, for sure. And he's like, okay, but when things get hard, I'm going to remind you that you said that. And things got hard. And it was always, for both of us, it was our primary focus, what's best for our son. And, I have people I have husbands who are like, what's best for our kids is that we not get divorced. And that's actually factually untrue. The research bears out that divorce does not screw up kids. having a toxic, contentious divorce that puts kids in the middle of an ugly battle or even a not ugly battle, that will screw up your kids.
Yep. Totally.
Not the divorce itself. A super healthy, collaborative, amicable divorce process and co-parenting relationship will have minimal impact on your kids long term. Actually zero impact long term. They've done studies that they have the exact same levels of anxiety and depression and scholastic achievement and all of the things long term than kids who whose parents did not get divorced. In the short term, yes, they are impacted. They are affected. Absolutely. But in the long term, very little impact. But you take, that same study, kids who were dragged through the court system, it has a huge impact on them. Those are the kids who end up, with, trouble with relationships in their future and with alcoholism and drug addiction. Like, it's not the divorce.
Yeah. Depression, mental health issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you're teaching your kids that love is conditional, that your love of them is conditional, using them as a weapon, as a pawn. Like, it's just so sick. So
I've known some people like this, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so guilty of that. I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah.
And what are the things to be, conscious of so that you're not doing that? So if you are in court, what are the things to not drag them through it or make them see all of the...
One of the things that's really difficult in the U.S., many, many states in the U.S., percentage of custody determines support is part of the it's part of the equation for support. And I think that's where one of the many, many ways that the family court system does our children a huge disservice, because it shouldn't have anything to do with it. Right? Because then you have kids, then the family law puts kids in the middle. And so they're like, oh, well, I want 50-50. Well, then you're going to have to pay this much child support. Well, then screw that. I'm going for, 100%. And now suddenly you're trying to take your kid away from their other parent because you don't want to pay the other parent support, child support. So that's one thing that I think we have to be really careful about. And and then not saying that, like, we say things to our kids that are so inappropriate, right? Like, and we don't mean to. God, I've done it too. I mean, and this is what I do for a living, right? Like, but when my son comes home and he's like, daddy's angry, or daddy does this, or daddy does that, like walking the delicate line between empathy and like validating his experience without throwing his dad under the bus and like vilifying him. Even though I want to be like, if like inside I'm like, dude, same. That's why I divorced him. Right. But like, I can't do that. And I have walked this line for, especially in his teen years, probably not very well, I will say. 'Cause it's hard. Right. 'Cause I want to validate him and let him know that, like, yeah, there are issues there,
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that are like, we do it without even knowing it. Right? We're like, yeah, I know. Isn't he? I mean, no, honey, like, how do I validate this? How do I validate this without crossing over into bashing and bad mouthing? Like, it's so hard. I'm trying to think what other things we do or say, or like, I mean, God, I know, I think about my mom. She was a full-time single mom, and she was like, my dad didn't pay any child support. It was terrible. And she would like put notes in my little suitcase when I was really little. And she'd be like, give this to your dad. And it's like the worst thing that you can possibly do. We know that now. But also, I'm like, this poor woman was fighting to put groceries on the table, and she just needed $50, or I needed new shoes, and she didn't know. My mom literally, her friends bought her a bicycle so she could bike around New York City so that she could save bus and subway fare so that she could put dinner on the table for me.
Wow.
And so someone that desperate, like maybe putting a note in a suitcase seems like a good idea, or like an only idea, right? Maybe if my 4-year-old asks him for support, he'll give it to her because it's not coming from me, right? Because he hates me. And I think my mom went through all of those. I think she, and it put me in a really terrible position as a child. But like, I don't know if I blame her, right? Like,
Right.
but so there are those things that we don't mean to, but we feel back into a corner and we don't know what else to do. And
Oh gosh.
she was going through the courts and she was having his wages garnished, and then he would quit his job. And then, like, I mean, so God love her, like she was desperate.
Yes, absolutely. And I know there's tons of those situations.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And it's hard when you're struggling and you're so angry to keep it inside,
Absolutely. Or when when your kids are like, but I want an Xbox, and you like just want to scream, I would love to get you an Xbox, but your father hasn't paid child support in 6 months and I can't. Like, right. Like that's,
right.
That's what you want to say, because that is the truth. Oh, here's the other thing that I want to say. Really, the most important thing is a lot of people will say, don't my kids deserve to know the truth about the divorce?
Oh, yes. I'm so glad you're saying this. Yes.
No, they do not. They are children. They have absolutely no developmental reason. It is entirely developmentally inappropriate for them to know any of the reasons for the divorce, especially if one of the reasons was infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
It is not your children's business to know that, so-and-so had an affair, your dad had an affair with so-and-so. Absolutely not. I have a lot of dads who will, at the conversation where they have to tell the kids, and the dads will be like, Daddy doesn't want this. This is all mom. Mom doesn't want to be part of the family anymore. I want to keep the family together, but, this is what mom wants. No. By the way, that's why she's leaving you.
Yeah.
So those things are really inappropriate. And I get it. I get it. I don't want to get divorced. And I'm here in this position where I'm having to neutrally tell my children something that I didn't want to have happen. And I have to remain neutral and not tell them that I didn't want it while I'm breaking their hearts. Unfortunately, yes.
Yep. And this is really the time when you've got to be an adult and a grown-up. Mm-hmm. And you're not a kid that gets to have a temper tantrum with your parent. And, you can't, you have to suck it up, vent it out to one of your friends.
Yep.
But it's not, I will always say it's not your business, the relationship, unless they're in danger, unless they're, there's something abuse or something, that's a totally different situation. But if your ex-spouse had an affair, that's their business. It has nothing to do with the parent-child relationship at all. Right. And that also isn't any of your business. So what they do when he's at dad's house or whatever, that's their business. And it's not up to you to judge and go, well, you should not like your dad, or you should not like, it's not up to you to make that decision. But when we say those things and you do those things, you are dramatically influencing how they think about that parent, which is not fair.
Exactly. And you have to remember that a child's brain sees themselves as one half of mom and one half of dad. So anything you say about the other parent, you are in essence saying about them. That's how they process it. And
and this is why the depression and the mental health issues are such a big result of bad mouthing. I mean, right there, you just, yeah,
that's it. My mom says I'm abusive. My mom says I'm a narcissist. My mom, right? Like that's how they're absorbing it. That may not be what you're saying, but that is how they're absorbing it.
Exactly.
We really could talk forever about that.
I know, we really could. I'm having you back on.
I love it. I'd have you on mine too. Yeah, we got
Awesome. I love it. Well, because there's so much more to you. And I know, okay, we're running out of time here. So I want to make sure that until, between now and then when I have you on again, where people can find more information about you and all of you have your Should I Stay or Should I Go? I know you have multiple things that you offer. Where can everyone find all of that?
Thank you. KateAnthony.com. That's like the mothership. That's the hub.
Perfect.
And I have on there a link to my private Facebook group, which is the Should I Stay or Should I Go group. I have something called the Ultimate Divorce Survival Guide, which includes how to tell your kids, all that kind of stuff. And then my program, Should I Stay or Should I Go, is on there. And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at the Divorce Survival Guide.
Oh my gosh, so awesome. I'm excited to follow you on TikTok.
Oh my God. I literally just started. I know. I'm like, oh God, TikTok, really? Okay.
I start, then I stop. I start and I stop. And then I'm like, okay, Chloe, that's one of our girls. I'm like, you got to help me. I don't know what I'm doing here. She helps me like record stuff, but it's so fun. And then there's times where Mike and I just look at it and then we're addicted. And I'm like, did 20 minutes just go by and we're just scrolling through TikTok?
My girlfriends are constantly sending me TikToks and I'm like, stop, you have to stop because then I can't stop.
Yeah.
It's like eating a potato chip. Like, come on.
Totally. Hey, real quick too, on your site, is there a link to your podcast there?
Oh my God. I have a podcast, you guys.
Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute. Hold on.
Wow.
You can get so much more, Kate Anthony.
Wow. I forgot I have a podcast. Yes. It's called the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, and it's available on all of the podcasting platforms wherever you listen. And it is also on my website. Thank you.
And it's so good. It's so good.
So funny.
Oh my gosh. You're so awesome. I can't wait to have you back. I feel like we need to sign off now so we can go tweeze our eyebrows. And
totally. And I have therapy. Just, it's full transparency. I have to go to therapy because that's what I still do. See?
You got to do it. I love therapy. I'm such a fan.
Me too. Some days.
Some days. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Kate, this was so much fun. It's like such a blast, just so much valuable information. And I can't wait to have you on again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. And we like to say, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you love and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't. See you next time.